Entering into a relationship, especially at a young age, it can be difficult to understand what lies behind the tenderness and smiles. Everything seems sincere, but this is not always the case. To paraphrase a well-known saying, one can derive a simple thesis: from the birth of a child to murder, there may be just one step. Amanda Doman was a sweet and friendly girl. From an early age, she surrounded herself with many friends and was always kind and sociable. At the same time, she was not overly trusting and remained quite selective in choosing her closest circle. Amanda was born and lived in the small town of Delta, Ohio, USA, with a population of 3,000 people. She enjoyed the humanities the most and loved children, so she decided to become a kindergarten teacher or a school teacher early on. Amanda paid great attention to her education, as she wanted to secure financial stability for herself in the future. Therefore, she planned to finish college and find full-time employment before starting a family. However, reality turned out to be far from her idealized dreams. The relationship between her parents was not working out, conflicts constantly arose, and they gradually decided to divorce. When this happened, Amanda was 13 years old, and she chose to stay with her father. The man quickly remarried a woman named Deborah, and the three of them started living happily together. Among her circle of friends, Amanda particularly valued a boy named James Remy, whom she had known since kindergarten. The children grew up together, attended the same school, and became inseparable friends. While working part-time during the summer, she grew even closer to James. He was described as a funny and pleasant young man. Gradually, they developed feelings for each other, and the young lovers began dating. All of this evolved into a more serious relationship after they finished school. Soon, Amanda decided to move out and live with her boyfriend in James' apartment as soon as she managed to find a part-time job. She started working because she did not want to depend on her relatives. The girl got a job in the kitchen of a local restaurant, where she worked part-time to combine work with her studies. Despite their strong feelings, when the girl introduced the boy to her family as her beloved, they were not thrilled. From the very beginning, James did not appeal to any of them, and even the girl's stepmother expressed concerns about this relationship, but Amanda was adamant. She was so in love and decided that all the warnings were an exaggeration. She believed that she knew better than others how to proceed, but the adults viewed the situation more objectively. The young man behaved strangely, but in the end, Amanda continued to build a serious relationship despite her young age. After moving in together, the boy's behavior changed dramatically for the worse. Gradually, he began to control his girlfriend more and more, constantly jealous and accusing her of infidelity. All of this escalated to the point of moral pressure experienced by the heroine of the story. The worst fears of her relatives, which they had told her about at home, began to become a reality. Unfortunately, the inexperienced girl initially did not notice what was actually happening in her relationship with her boyfriend. Amanda wanted to break up with him quite quickly, as he was very controlling and manipulative, but she was afraid. Jim believed that he had the right to control everything in her life, from her social circle to the clothes she wore every day. As soon as she left the house, even to go to the store, regular calls would start within minutes. The boyfriend was jealous of her literally to every pole. The situation only worsened and Amanda became pregnant. At first, Jim reacted to it neutrally, but his dissatisfaction gradually grew as his beloved devoted less attention to him. She did not want to terminate the pregnancy on his advice and decided to become a mother. Of course, all of this required preparation, and she completely dedicated herself to this process. Naturally, this affected the relationship, as the girl began to divide the attention that had previously been fully given to Jim, to prepare for the baby's arrival. The boyfriend continued to insist that he did not want this child and that she should get rid of it, but the story's heroine refused to follow his demands. On May 21, 2016, a boy was born. By this time, Amanda's relationships with almost all her friends were ruined. James was constantly present at the hospital, which seriously interfered, as the story's heroine wanted to meet with her relatives. Unfortunately, neither the boyfriend or the father and stepmother got along with each other. They could not tolerate one another, so every meeting turned into quarrels and mutual stress. It seemed that James deliberately prevented her from meeting with her loved ones. However, this is typical behavior for the manipulator he was. Because of this, the father and stepmother never got to see their grandson while he was in the hospital with his mother. The boy first met his grandmother and grandfather when he was already 3 months old. All this time, Amanda could only correspond with them and send photos of the child through messengers. Gradually, James became even harsher and more manipulative. Any little thing could infuriate him. Everything immediately escalated into a serious problem. Most of all, he loved to reduce everything to accusations of infidelity. Each time, he would conclude that the child was not his. Such behavior greatly upset Amanda. The girl resisted in every possible way, but she was fighting not only against James but also against postpartum depression and hormonal changes, which are inevitable for many young mothers. The situation only got worse. It ended with James not only verbally attacking her, he took a knife and held it to her throat, threatening to kill her. Even despite this, Amanda continued to believe that she would be able to keep the family together for the sake of her son and set her mind to it. She believed that this period of aggression was solely related to the changes that had occurred in the young family after the birth of the child. The young mother did not tell her relatives about this incident but shared her experiences with several friends. The manipulator had intimidated Amanda so much and ruined her relationships with her relatives that she was simply afraid to turn to them for help. This often happens in such situations. Even Amanda's closest friends realized that the events in her life were far from normal. James' behavior became especially dangerous after the child was born. Now he posed a threat not only to Amanda but also to their son. Everyone unanimously advised the girl to break up with the boy. Finally, Amanda seriously considered ending this relationship. Making such a decision was not easy for the story's heroine. She remembered well how caring, loving, and gentle James had been at the beginning of their romance, and how many years they had been friends. The girl hoped that these were temporary difficulties and that they both just needed time to adapt to the new circumstances. Therefore, she forgave him for the insults and even the physical he began to use time and time again. But this could not go on forever. One evening, after another quarrel, the young couple decided to go to a bar to drink, relax, and discuss what had happened. At this time, Amanda's mother came to babysit the little one. The woman thought she would only have to look after the boy for a couple of hours, but 3 hours had passed and neither her daughter nor James had returned home yet. As it turned out, that evening Amanda's boyfriend had too much to drink, but the girl herself did not drink, so she got behind the wheel to get home. However, after driving a few blocks, James demanded that she let him drive. Initially, Amanda refused, but the boy began to get angry, so she gave in to avoid provoking another argument. Unfortunately, this turned out to be a fatal mistake. Despite both young people being buckled up, a few hundred meters later, James crashed into a parked car. The driver and passenger were hit at speed. From the impact with the steering wheel, James did not suffer serious injuries, but Amanda hit her head hard on the shattered windshield and got cut. Although the fault for the accident clearly lay with the boy, he immediately began to blame his girlfriend for everything. She was in no mood for arguments, as she was trying to stop the bleeding and was afraid that she might have suffered some life-threatening injuries. But James had apparently completely lost control of himself. Instead of calling an ambulance, he started yelling at Amanda, and verbal abuse quickly escalated into physical. James beat up the injured girl. After this incident, Amanda Mongas finally realized that the boy had no warm feelings for her. He turned out to be a cruel person who should have been kept away from the very beginning. The first thing the girl did was file a police report and delete James from all her contacts. After the accident and the assault, Amanda called her father and asked him to take her and the child home. This is how the manga's family was reunited. The girl obtained a restraining order against James and believed that she and her son were now safe. The boy did lay low for a while, but they had no idea that the greatest trials and dangers were yet to come. Back in her parents' home, Amanda started living with her parents again, as she had before. The girl decided to start her life from scratch, trying to forget about this unhealthy relationship and erase the painful period associated with James from her memory. She found a job at the same restaurant, but now as a waitress. It was an establishment frequently visited by the residents of their small town, and Amanda knew many of them well. The girl renewed her communication with the residents of Delta, met new people, and made friends. Amanda had a very sociable nature and easily made contact, so she quickly became a favorite of all the restaurant's visitors. Things were going well, and over time, the bitterness of the experienced offenses gradually receded. Amanda earned a decent income for her age and could independently provide for herself and her child. Therefore, she began looking for an apartment she could rent to move out from her parents' place. Despite the fact that they got along well, there was not enough space in the house for a full-fledged family life. While working at the restaurant, Amanda met a young man named Curtis. They often saw each other back in their school years but hardly communicated. Now the girl had the opportunity to get to know him better and realized that he was a very nice guy. A mutual attraction developed between them. Curtis sincerely supported Amanda and helped her in many ways. These feelings grew into something more, and the young lovers were drawn to each other. The guy warmly accepted Amanda's son from her previous relationship and repeatedly assured her that he treated him as his own. The girl saw this with her own eyes. Eventually, on March 13, 2017, the heroine of this story dared to officially announce her relationship with Curtis, not even suspecting what it might lead to. In her social media accounts, she changed her status from single to in a relationship. At the same time, Amanda immediately indicated that she had serious intentions. On the same day, Curtis moved in with his beloved, and from then on, they lived as one family together with the baby, Amanda's father, and her stepmother. The young lovers planned to rent a separate apartment in the near future to start a full-fledged life together and create their own family. On Tuesday, March 14, 2017, Curtis woke up very early, as he was going to work before 5 in the morning. Of the adults in the house, only Amanda, who was still sleeping, and her stepmother Deborah remained. The baby was quietly sleeping in his crib. He had just turned 10 months old. Suddenly, around 6 in the morning, the stepmother was awakened by a loud bang. Barely opening her eyes from being half asleep, the woman did not understand what had happened. It seemed to her that a shot had been fired or something large had broken. Therefore, Deborah decided to get up and check what was going on. She called out Amanda's name, but in response, she heard some suspicious noise, and then footsteps. Someone was quickly approaching her room. The woman realized that this resembled an intrusion into the house by an outsider. To avoid being attacked, she locked the door of her bedroom from the inside and propped herself against it to prevent the intruder from entering. But without hesitation, the person simply shot through the door lock and wounded Deborah. The bullet grazed her thumb, so the woman miraculously avoided serious injury, although she found herself in the line of fire. Now nothing could restrain the intruder. He kicked the door open and burst into the bedroom. It was a man in a mask, armed with a pistol. He looked very agitated, constantly looking around as if expecting an attack. Looking at Deborah, he asked where Curtis was. Obviously, the attacker was looking for the young man. However, instead of him, he came across a woman in her pajamas, which stunned him. Deborah replied that Curtis had already gone to work. They had missed each other about half an hour ago. This information only infuriated the stranger. He confessed that he had shot Amanda and threatened to kill anyone who tried to stand in his way without hesitation. Therefore, he demanded complete obedience. After that, the intruder ordered Deborah to take her mobile phone and then demanded that she give him the child. The woman tried to object, but he silently and menacingly cocked the gun. Realizing the futility of any arguments, she took the baby out of the crib but did not hand him over to the stranger. Instead, Deborah stated that she would accompany the child herself. She also gave the man Amanda's mobile phone, which he demanded. Next, the attacker pressed the barrel of the gun to the back of Deborah's head and forced her to leave the house, not even allowing her to change clothes. Despite the rather cold weather, the woman found herself on the street barefoot, wearing only her pajamas. The intruder put her in the car, after which he took off his mask. Then Deborah recognized him as James, the kidnapper whose hostage she was. The boy said that he needed a companion. He intended to flee the city with the child, and he planned to use Deborah as a hostage. The young man demanded that the woman show him the safest escape route to avoid police patrols. When they had driven a few hundred meters away from the house, the intruder ordered her to call an ambulance. According to him, the wounded Amanda was left in the house, and she could still be saved. He demanded that the medics be informed about this. Deborah obeyed and immediately contacted the 911 dispatcher. She reported that there was a wounded girl in the house who urgently needed help. The woman barely had time to provide the home address when the attacker snatched the phone from her as soon as the dispatcher asked for more details about the incident. The police arrived at the call within minutes. The patrol officers were the first to arrive at the scene. They immediately noticed that the front door was unlocked. As soon as they went inside, one of the officers heard alarming moans. The police officers headed towards the sound and found themselves in Amanda's room. The young mother was lying on the bed, covered in blood but still breathing. At first, the law enforcement officers assumed that it was a suicide attempt. Therefore, they asked the girl where the weapon was that she had shot herself with. Given her possible unstable state, they wanted to ensure the safety of both themselves and Amanda from another shot. However, the girl did not know where the gun had gone. It was nowhere to be seen. It was becoming evident that someone else had fired the shot. Amanda asked where her child was. One of the police officers noticed a baby crib in the room. But it was empty. When asked who had taken her son, the girl managed to answer, James Remy. After that, she lost consciousness. When the medics tried to provide assistance to the young mother, she was already on the verge of life and death. Amanda was urgently taken to the hospital, where the 23-year-old girl later died. At this time, Curtis and the girl's father were at work. They had no idea what was happening in their home, as Deborah was still being held hostage and could not alert anyone about the unfolding events. The police officers also failed to clarify all the circumstances, but they learned that Deborah and the 10-month-old child were likely in the hands of the attacker as hostages. Law enforcement officials immediately issued an alert to warn local residents about the danger. An armed criminal with hostages was on the loose in a vehicle. Meanwhile, Deborah with the baby in her arms and James were rapidly moving away from the city in the car. The young man was eager to reach the airport and demanded that the woman help him with this. Throughout the entire journey, he was extremely agitated. There was a railway crossing on the way. James saw that the barrier was lowering and a train was approaching. The boy became so excited that instead of braking, he stepped on the gas. However, the rails were raised high, and the car crashed into them with such force that something broke in it. Although James managed to cross the tracks, he damaged not only the vehicle but also the barriers in the process. A few dozen meters from the railway, the car stopped. It could no longer continue. James realized that he was at an impasse and needed help. He took a mobile phone and called his friend. Soon, a van arrived with a woman and 2 children inside. James, Deborah, and baby William got into this car. They were taken to a house at an unknown address, apparently where the van owner lived. In the house they entered, James' friend lived. The kidnapper sat his hostage with the child on the couch. The boy was still extremely agitated and continued to pace back and forth across the room, holding a gun in his hands. After some thought, the criminal concluded that he would take his friend's car and continue the journey to fly out of the country. Taking advantage of a short break, Deborah asked to go to the toilet. James allowed it but ordered his comrade to go with her. However, the latter did not go inside the bathroom. Therefore, the woman, left alone, tried to escape through the window. Unfortunately, this attempt was unsuccessful. By this time, the woman who had picked them up at the railway crossing had already left the house with her children. She realized that the police might raid the place and was afraid that a shootout would begin. No one wanted to endanger themselves and their children. James did not stop being nervous. He quickly drove off with the hostages. The boy did not trust anyone and suspected that the woman who had given him a ride in the van might have contacted the police. The young criminal was behind the wheel and continued to be agitated. He smoked cigarette after cigarette to calm down a little and focus on the road. Suddenly, the lighter stopped working. James decided to stop at the nearest gas station to buy a new one. Before that, he warned Deborah that he would kill her if she tried to do something foolish. After that, the criminal entered the store at the gas station, where he got caught on surveillance cameras for the first time since the beginning of the escape. The gas station security noticed him. The boy behaved suspiciously, but at that moment, no one knew how dangerous he was. Right during his movement through the store, an emergency alert sounded. It turned out to be a voiced police warning and contained a photo of the criminal. Law enforcement officers informed local residents about the kidnapping of Deborah along with the child. In addition, the message stated that Amanda did not survive the attack and died in the hospital without regaining consciousness. The bullet that hit her in the chest proved fatal. Despite the fact that the young man had taken the life of his ex-beloved with his own hands, he seemed very upset by the news of her quick demise. After returning to the car for a lighter, the boy refused to continue the trip. He just froze in place, pondering his next steps. James began to think out loud about the consequences and then shared his terrifying plans with Deborah. It turned out that he had only 5 bullets left. One was intended for the boy, one for the hostage, and the remaining 3 he was going to use in a confrontation with the police. The criminal hoped that these bullets would be enough to deal with the law enforcement officers and take possession of their weapons. This was a backup plan. If he failed, he had saved 1 more bullet for himself. James found himself in an extremely difficult situation. It was obvious that he did not intend to surrender to the authorities, as it would mean life imprisonment. The young man preferred to attempt an escape or commit suicide in case of failure. After this terrifying statement, they drove on. Now Deborah felt even more anxiety and danger. The police arrived at the gas station too late. The criminal, along with the hostages, had already managed to leave. After that, the FBI joined the investigation. They managed to determine the approximate direction of the kidnappers' movement. However, he still had a few hours of a head start. To intercept James, law enforcement officers from all the nearest cities and even neighboring states were involved in the operation. This case acquired a federal scale. However, no success was achieved in the next few hours. Deborah and the baby were still in James' hands. The police closely monitored their movements. The car of the kidnapper's accomplice was recorded by the cameras of another gas station located a couple of 100 kilometers from the previous one. Here he also stopped, ordered Deborah to stay in the car, and threatened violence if she dared to ask for help. Despite this, the woman felt despair and wanted to talk to the first passerby she met to tell them about her situation. But she did not even know exactly where she was. Deborah understood that they were far from home, which meant that people here might not have heard about the kidnapping and murder at all. In the end, the hostage decided not to take risks and just hoped that the police were making every effort to rescue her and the boy. At this gas station, James bought a can of beer and a lighter, and also used the restroom. After his return, the hostage also asked to go to the toilet. Of course, without warm clothes and shoes, she looked too suspicious, so he gave her a jacket and sneakers. All of this came in handy, as time was running out. The boy closely watched her from the car, so the woman did not dare to seek help from outsiders. As soon as Deborah returned, the criminal, along with the hostages, abruptly took off. The chase began. The police finally found the car. The gas station employee recognized the criminal and called the law enforcement officers. James behaved extremely aggressively on the road. At some point, Deborah decided to move closer to the boy to shield him with her body in case of a shootout. However, James did not allow this to happen. The child remained in the back seat. Suddenly, the criminal stopped the car and took his son himself, putting him on his lap. The police officers, holding their weapons at the ready, approached and surrounded the car in Fulton County, Indiana. Despite all the threats and inadequate behavior of James, he never opened fire, neither on his hostages, nor on the law enforcement officers, nor on himself. Instead, he handed the baby over to the police and was arrested. Finally, the ordeal of Deborah and the child came to an end. The woman could not believe in the rescue. She could not even cry, she simply fainted at that moment from nervous exhaustion. More than 100 people attended the funeral of 23-year-old Amanda, who was a favorite of many, and each of them honored her memory. The girl was cremated. During the investigation, it was found that the reason for James' inadequate behavior was banal jealousy. In the morning, after he saw the status of his ex-girlfriend that she was in a relationship, the boy flared up with anger and could not calm down. He made the decision to deal with her, which he had previously warned the girl about, but she did not take his words seriously, which turned out to be in vain. James immediately took a weapon and went to the house of his ex-girlfriend's father to catch her in bed with another man, but Curtis was no longer at home, so he only shot Amanda. If the girl's new boyfriend had been in the house, the same fate would have awaited him. 27-year-old James was charged with premeditated murder, kidnapping of 2 people, and other less serious crimes. In the end, the criminal pleaded guilty to all the committed acts and was sentenced to life imprisonment with the right to parole after 27 years. Deborah was surprised by the fact that the girl actually managed to live until the police arrived, and it was she who reported the kidnapping of the child and stepmother. Amanda also named the name of the attacker, which became a decisive factor in saving at least 2 innocent lives. To this day, Deborah considers herself indebted to this girl and has taken on the responsibility of raising the boy. The child is being raised by the father and stepmother of the deceased. Gale White, a model with a huge online following, had been making a living for years by posting her revealing photos on a popular website. The young woman always assured her fans that she was happy in her relationship with her boyfriend, but behind the idealistic facade lurked a horrifying reality that eventually came to light. This terrible event took place in 2022 in the city of Bristol, located in southwest England. Bristol is a port city with a population of over 400,000 people, the only major urban center in the country where the per capita welfare level exceeds the national average. It was here in March 2000 that Bradley Lewis was born. He grew up in a loving and close-knit family, where his parents, Steve and Rachel Lewis, were honest and decent people who always put family first. Bradley grew into a cheerful and friendly young man. Like many English kids, he was an avid football fan from a young age. During his school years at St. Stephen's, Bradley played for the local football team. The boy had many friends and acquaintances. When Bradley became a teenager, he started going to parties. At age 14, fate brought Bradley together with 15-year-old Gale White. The young couple quickly grew close and realized they had fallen in love. Despite both being attractive, their personalities were quite different. Unlike Bradley, Abby was not as kind and welcoming, which was partly due to her difficult childhood. When the girl was just 2, her parents began arguing frequently, with the fights almost always escalating to physical. 2 years later, when Abby turned 4, her parents divorced. Her mother took custody of her daughter and soon found a new man. The stepfather turned out to be much worse than Abby's biological father, beating not only his wife but also little Abby. Soon after, the mother decided it would be better for her daughter to go live with her grandparents. At school, Abby was a problem child, with teachers constantly reprimanding her for bad behavior. The girl had poor academic performance and was even expelled from school several times. It is known that at age 13, Abby consulted a psychiatrist who diagnosed her with certain psychological and emotional disorders. Despite being prescribed antidepressants, the girl's life never improved. At 15, Abby started dating Bradley Lewis. As the years passed, the young man finished school, got vocational training, and found a job as a floor layer. Abby, on the other hand, never worked and didn't even try to find steady employment. Instead, the girl began to earn a decent income on the OnlyFans website. OnlyFans is a platform where creators can share any content with their subscribers. While the service can be used for a variety of purposes, it has a dubious reputation, as it is mostly used by models posting revealing photos to attract fans from around the world. It's not hard to guess what kind of content Abby chose. Under the pseudonym Mitzi, she began posting racy photos, calling herself a fake Barbie. The girl's fan base grew rapidly, as did her earnings. In the first year alone, Abby managed to make £50,000 sterling, a little over $60,000, but the triumph was short-lived. At the start of her second year on OnlyFans, Abby's earnings dropped significantly. More and more models were appearing on the site, competing with the fake Barbie. Soon the girl lost about 75% of her subscribers, and her annual income amounted to only £12,000, approximately $15,000. It should be noted that by that time, Abby and Bradley already had 4 children. The names, genders and ages of the couple's offspring are kept secret. It is only known that one child was fathered by another man, not Bradley. The family lived in a small house. Bradley worked hard to provide a decent life for Abby and the kids. The young man's parents always supported the young family, actively helping to care for their grandchildren. Abby often posted photos showing herself with Bradley, but these idyllic images did not reflect the real state of affairs. The couple's relationship was never smooth. Abby became addicted to illicit substances and often came home heavily drunk. Although the girl denied having a serious addiction, she complained to loved ones that Bradley was constantly controlling her and treating her cruelly. According to Abby, he also cheated on her regularly. However, those around them knew that in fact the opposite was true. It was Abby who was unfaithful and had even given birth to a child by another man. The girl constantly lied to everyone and complained about her boyfriend. Friends said the couple had a toxic relationship. Abby considered Bradley her property. His pals warned the young man that his girlfriend was a complete psychopath and that he should run away from her. Bradley's mother disliked Abby, believing that she treated her son rudely and cruelly. The woman felt Bradley deserved to be treated better. The constant scandals led to the involvement of social services. Abby was forbidden to live with Bradley or approach him. The young man moved in with his parents. But Abby still didn't trust him. She kept calling incessantly, trying to control Bradley, forcing him to come back home and spend nights with her. Despite the warnings, he agreed and neglected safety measures. Meanwhile, Abby was active on social media. She made short TikTok videos portraying herself as a victim, a betrayed pregnant mother. We shouldn't forget that virtual reality often misleads people. Abby took advantage of this, publicly humiliating Bradley, painting him as a real monster. In early March 2022, the girl sent a voice message to her friend. Abby said, "I don't believe Bradley, he never tells me the truth. I have to interrogate him all night to get the truth out of him, but he keeps lying. Bradley says I need psychological help, and people around me are warning that one of us will end up dead. That's how it is. I believe I'm capable of killing. And I could end up in prison. On March 19, 2022, another big fight broke out between Bradley and Abby, during which the girl stabbed the young man directly in the arm. The wound turned out to be serious. Bradley was forced to immediately seek medical help. When the doctor asked what happened, Bradley said he was injured at work. He didn't want Abby to have problems with the police, so he deliberately lied. After this unpleasant incident, Bradley decided it was time to end the relationship with Abby, even though they had 3 children together. However, he continued to communicate with the girl and again ignored the recommendations of social services. 6 days passed. On Thursday, March 25, at 8 p.m., a terrible scream was heard from the house where the White Lewis family lived. It was Abby. She was begging for help and asking for an urgent call to the emergency services. A neighbor heard the girl's cries. The woman rushed to help and learned from Abby that her boyfriend Bradley wasn't breathing. After that, the neighbor entered the White Lewis home and saw a terrible scene. There were bloodstains in the hallway, living room, and everywhere. Bradley was in the kitchen. The young man was lying on his back, unconscious. The neighbor saw a bloody knife on the radiator. Frightened, she immediately called the police. Then the neighbor's husband ran up, who also witnessed this horrific scene. Abby was at home. Fortunately, at that moment their children were visiting Bradley's parents. When the police and ambulance arrived, the medics tried to help the victim. There were blood stains everywhere on the ground floor of the house. The police found a shirt with a mop and several other items with blood on them. Abby acted as if she was really scared. The girl claimed that she had a fight with Bradley and he stabbed himself in protest. The officers didn't believe her, but still allowed her to go to the hospital with Bradley, who was unconscious. The young man was urgently sent for surgery, but the doctors were powerless. 22-year-old Bradley had lost a lot of blood. At 1:30 a.m. on March 26, he died. The autopsy showed that the cause of death was a single stab wound to the chest. The knife hit right in the heart. When the parents learned about their son's death, their world fell apart. Now it only remained to find out what really happened in the White Lewis house and who was to blame for the young man's death. Friends and those close to the couple said that in recent times, relations between Bradley and Abby had been extremely tense, and a friend of the deceased reported that Bradley had recently confessed to him that he had a new girlfriend. Obviously, this could have really angered Abby. The police began to suspect her of murder. They arrested the 23-year-old girl and took her into custody. During the first interrogation, Abby said that she and Bradley had a fight that evening, and the young man threatened to stab himself. So she snatched the knife from him to throw it out into the street. She ran down the corridor to the door, but Bradley caught up with her. According to Abby, he grabbed her by the wrist and plunged the knife straight into his chest. Investigators asked Abby numerous questions, but the girl refused to answer them. Her version of events seemed too absurd to the police, so, as before, no one believed Abby. After spending 2 months behind bars, she finally admitted her guilt in involuntary manslaughter. But here's what really happened on March 25. After Abby seriously injured Bradley's arm on March 19, he decided to end their relationship. On March 25, the young man invited the girl to meet in the park and informed her of the breakup. Abby reacted extremely negatively to the news. At 5 p.m., the couple, along with their friends Ryan and Louise, went to one of the local bars. An hour later, the group moved to another bar, where they continued their leisure. According to eyewitnesses, while at the bar, Abby used and didn't control her alcohol intake at all. The girl was in a bad mood, rude to the staff and patrons of the establishment, not mincing words. At some point, Bradley and Ryan went to the restroom. There, Bradley, crying, confessed to his friend that he wanted to get as far away from Abby as possible. But he was afraid to do so because the girl had threatened to harm herself. While the guys were in the restroom, Abby was rude to one of the bar patrons and even hit a stranger in the face. In response, the man pushed the girl so hard that she fell to the floor. A friend helped Abby up and led her aside. When Bradley and his buddy returned to the table, the angry Abby grabbed a glass of cocktail and threw its contents in the young man's face. The girl began to publicly humiliate Bradley, reproaching him for not standing up for her. Ryan tried to calm Abby down and shame her, but in response, she spat in his face. At 7:50 p.m., Bradley and Abby got into the car of their old pal Alfie, whom they had met at the bar. The man drove the couple home. According to him, Bradley and Abby argued the whole way. Upon reaching the house, the girl immediately jumped out of the car and quickly headed inside. Bradley sat in the car for a few more minutes, saying goodbye to his friend. The last thing he said was, "I'm going to die when I get home." Alfie felt uneasy, because everything that was happening seemed strange and eerie to him. He left Bradley his phone number in case he needed help. The friends said goodbye, and Alfie drove away. Entering the house, Bradley ran into Abby, who was standing with a knife in her hand. During an argument, the enraged girl stabbed the blade into the young man. Within just 20 minutes, the neighbor was already calling the rescue service. Examining Bradley's cell phone, detectives found a huge number of messages from Abby. Starting from the first months of 2022, the girl had sent him hundreds of threats. The content of the messages was so violent that I will refrain from quoting any of them. Several psychiatrists spoke with Abby before the trial. They concluded that the girl suffered from borderline personality disorder and was absolutely unable to control her anger, being emotionally unstable. It also turned out that just a few days before the tragedy, Abby had experienced severe stress. She had to have an abortion, and at the same time, she learned from friends about Bradley's new relationship on the side. Psychiatrists confirmed that Abby showed no signs of delusions, hallucinations, or other symptoms of psychosis. The jury deliberated for 12 hours before unanimously reaching a verdict. 23-year-old Abby Gale White was found guilty of murder. The court sentenced her to life imprisonment with the right to parole after 18 years. Thus, the girl will not be able to go free until at least 2040. Bradley's father admitted that losing his son was the greatest tragedy of his life. The man had never experienced so much suffering, sadness, and heartache. Bradley's mother said that a part of her world had been destroyed and that she would carry this loss in her heart until her dying day. It is known that custody of Abby and Bradley's children was taken by the deceased young man's parents. Hundreds of concerned citizens who wanted to support the Lewis family attended Bradley's funeral. In May 2022, the young man's body was cremated, and later the football club he played for held a friendly match. Hundreds of people agreed to come to the game. The players expressed their condolences to the relatives of the deceased and gave part of the proceeds from the match, about £7,000 to Lewis's parents. The rest of the money was transferred to a charity that provides psychological assistance to men. Bradley's former coach, who had trained him since childhood, said that the young man had always been kind and decent. The coach emphasized that he was saying this not because it was the proper thing to say, but because in this case it was the absolute truth. The man warmly recalled not only his ward, but also his parents, honest people who were pleasant to deal with. As for Abby, she lost everything she had. Her beloved, her family, her children, her home. She was deprived of that which many would give their lives for. In 2006, the life of 20-year-old Ukrainian native Yana Kasyan took a pivotal turn as she set foot on American soil for the first time. Despite having earned a law degree in her homeland, Yana found employment as a translator upon settling in Los Angeles. She nurtured a dream of making a permanent home in the United States, building a brilliant career, finding a life partner, having children, and providing them with a bright future in this grand and prosperous nation. As the years passed, 9 years later, Yana crossed paths with Blake Leibel, a wealthy 34-year-old man. It seemed her American dream was beginning to materialize. Blake, an aspiring Hollywood producer, had millions of dollars in his bank account, inherited from his family. Blake was raised in an affluent Canadian family engaged in the real estate business in Toronto. However, as he himself admitted, not everything was picture-perfect in his personal life and family relationships. His father favored his older brother Cody, which stirred feelings of jealousy and anger in Blake. Cody followed in his father's footsteps, also involved in real estate, and owned recording studios. The wealth of the Leibel family traces back to the grandfather's generation. Blake's maternal grandfather founded an empire in the plastic manufacturing industry, while his paternal grandfather was an influential real estate developer in Toronto. Despite this, Blake's parents divorced. Cody, the older son, stayed with his father, while Blake moved in with his mother. The year 2011 brought sad news: Blake's mother passed away. It was then that a battle over the multi-million-dollar inheritance erupted between the father and sons. It was a time when Blake's relationship with his father significantly deteriorated. In total, the assets left by the mother were valued at $12 million. Blake received less than half of this sum. After that, at the age of 30, Blake decided to move to Hollywood to try his hand at directing and producing. Many people treated him condescendingly, seeing him only as a rich boy playing with his father's money. Most partners did not take him seriously. However, there were those who saw diligence and dedication in him. Blake immersed himself in creating projects, dreaming of conquering the directorial Olympus. He made a low-budget film called Foxes, College Students, about a student who tried to raise money for a hair transplant by creating a website featuring photos of female students. Blake also worked on an animated series, Spaceballs, based on the Mel Brooks movie. But his most ambitious project was the graphic novel, Syndrome, which he hoped to turn into a TV show. Blake's wealth and ambition attracted beautiful women like a magnet. In 2006, his chosen one was model Amanda Brown, who soon married him. The couple settled in a luxurious mansion in Beverly Hills. Amanda adored lavish parties and constantly dragged Blake along, although he preferred a quiet home life reading comics. By nature, he was more of a homebody. Shortly after the wedding, the couple had a son. In 2015, Amanda became pregnant for the second time, but suddenly Blake declared his desire for a divorce. His heart was captivated by another, Ukrainian Yana Kasyan. Blake openly confessed to Yana that it was over with his wife. A passionate romance ignited between them. The lovers traveled a lot, vacationed, and enjoyed dates. Blake gifted his beloved a luxurious Mercedes. Soon they moved to an apartment in West Hollywood and began living together. A few months later, Yana discovered she was pregnant. Blake assured her that he had already started the divorce process with his wife and was almost free. He proposed to Yana, and she felt on top of the world with happiness. To meet her future son-in-law, who had declared his intention to marry her daughter, Yana's mother Olga Kasyan flew to America. She also wanted to be there to help her daughter with the baby. And so the couple had a baby girl, Diana. Yana and Blake did not hide their happiness. The man surrounded his fiancée with care and affection. He constantly kissed Yana and even mastered the Russian phrase, "my love." But behind this idyllic facade hid Blake's greatest fear, the fear of losing everything. He often wrote to his friend that his brother Cody was up to his ears in debt due to his participation in poker games with Russian mafiosi. Blake trembled for his own safety and the safety of his family. Unlike his younger brother, Cody Leibel lived life to the fullest. He loved fast driving and overall led a tumultuous lifestyle. He appeared in public much more often than Blake. Indeed, Cody participated in high-stakes poker games with other wealthy individuals and members of the Russian mafia. Rumors reached Blake that his brother had lost over $1 million and had to repay this debt. This thought haunted him, as people involved in gambling could pose a deadly threat. At that time, Blake was still officially married to Amanda, but was already living with Yana and their daughter. Moreover, he was secretly seeing another woman. In mid-May 2016, this mistress, Constance, accused libel of committed on her birthday in her own home. Blake was detained, arrested, and taken into custody. He had to tell Yana about it. During the investigation, Blake was released, but in Yana's eyes, the perfect image of their family shattered. However, the girl did not want to lose him. She asked her mother Olga to take little Diana and vacate their apartment. Blake rented them a place 3 kilometers away from him. Yana left her daughter and focused exclusively on her relationship with Libel. By the way, at that point, the man had already lost interest in the child. Blake began demanding intimacy from Yana, threatening to go to another woman. But she had not yet recovered from the cesarean section and refused him. In response, the man began controlling her every move and behaved extremely domineeringly. Olga Kasyan begged her daughter to leave Blake and move in with them and her granddaughter. On May 23, 2016, Yana went shopping with her mother. Suddenly she started receiving messages from Blake. Her face instantly changed and she said she urgently needed to go to him. Yana left. The next day, her mother could not reach her by phone. Olga felt uneasy. The woman recounted. I had a feeling that something was wrong. I called my daughter 6 times, but there was no answer. Realizing that she could not contact her daughter, Olga decided to visit the apartment where Yana and Blake lived. However, little Diana was asleep and there was no one to look after her. So Olga had no choice but to turn to the police. Due to her lack of English, she had to wait to be connected with a Russian-speaking operator. The woman reported that she could not reach her daughter. The operator accepted the call, but the police were in no hurry to take any action. The next morning, Olga, together with a friend, took a taxi to the house where Yana and Blake lived. They drove up to the gated residential complex. As the women ran around the building trying to see Blake's apartment windows, they noticed his silhouette by the windowpane. Taking advantage of the opportunity when one of the residents was leaving through the gate, Olga and her friend managed to slip inside. Climbing to the 3rd floor, they persistently knocked on the door and rang the doorbell, but no one answered. Dialing 911 again, the women pleaded for help. The police arrived quickly, but without obvious signs of danger, such as screams from the apartment. They had no right to break in. Attempts to contact Blake were in vain. He did not answer the calls. Eventually, the police left him a voice message. Hello, this message is for Blake Libel. This is the West Hollywood Sheriff's Department. We are outside your apartment and we need to speak with you immediately, sir. But no response came. After standing at the door for several hours, the police left. A confused Olga did not know what to do next. There was no point in staying put, but she could not abandon tiny Diana, who was left with Olga's friend 3 kilometers away. On Thursday morning, the indefatigable Olga returned to the apartment door and once again begged the police to intervene. I want the police to come and free my daughter, she shouted into the phone. This time, law enforcement agreed that it was necessary to enter the apartment, because given Yana's recent childbirth, there was a risk of health problems. The police insisted that Olga wait outside. Descending from the 3rd floor, the woman sat down on the sidewalk. Meanwhile, the officers tried to unlock the door with the keys provided by the building manager, but it turned out that Blake had installed additional locks. They had to resort to more drastic measures and break down the door. Calling out for Blake, the police entered the apartment, but no one responded. The first thing that caught their eye was the mess. The doors from the hallway to the 2 bedrooms were locked and coded. They had to take them off the hinges. Entering the guest bedroom, they saw bloody traces. Blake once again ignored their calls. Heading to the master bedroom, the police encountered locked doors, piled with a heap of things. When they tried to open them, the contents began to collapse right on top of them. From the bedroom came Blake's scream, who declared that he would not come out because he was not at home. Later, he did call a friend, who convinced him to come out. After some time, Blake unlocked the door and appeared before the police in his underwear. By that time, detectives had already arrived at the apartment. Going inside, they found bloodstains on the headboard of the bed in the guest bedroom. On the wall was a large crimson stain that someone had tried to wipe away. And then a horrific sight opened before their eyes, Yana's lifeless body. The girl lay covered with a blanket up to her chin. A Mickey Mouse doll swayed above the bed. The injuries inflicted on Yana were shocking in their cruelty. Her scalp had been removed. The unnatural pallor of her skin indicated massive blood loss. Such atrocity could only be committed by a true sadist. Blake's face had scratches and bruises, and his arm bore bite marks. It became evident that Yana had fought for her life. During the search, the police found Blake's pants, in the pocket of which lay his passport and a considerable sum of money. The detective suspected that he planned to get rid of the body, cover his tracks, and escape to his native Canada. Blake was arrested and handcuffed. At this point, Olga entered the building and saw him being led out. The woman burst into tears, asking about her daughter. She was told the terrible news: Yana was dead. Olga was not allowed into the apartment. Just look at this frame. In the arrest photo, Blake Leibel, with scratches and bruises on his face, is smiling enigmatically. During the interrogation, he denied his involvement in his fiancée's death. He did not provide any comprehensible explanations for what happened in his apartment. Blake's only phrase was, "Science will tell you who did it." And so it happened. Experts thoroughly examined the crime scene and concluded that the killer had made great efforts to hide the traces of blood. Using a special solution and additional lighting, they were able to detect not only bloodstains but also streaks from cleaning agents. With the naked eye, one could see the bloodied bedding in the living room, but thanks to professional equipment, it became clear that evidence was scattered practically all over the floor. The experts did not overlook the bathroom either. Putting all the facts together, the detectives realized that the crime was committed in different rooms of the apartment. It lasted a long time and caused the victim excruciating suffering. Yana was tormented for about 8 hours. There was practically no blood left in her body, which explained the excessive pallor of her skin. Blake made every effort to wipe away all traces with cleaning agents. However, neither the agents themselves, nor the bedding, nor Yana's clothing were found in the apartment. Searching the trash cans, the police came across a blanket with a handprint missing part of the little finger. It later turned out that Blake was missing a phalanx of his right little finger. All the evidence unequivocally pointed to the fact that it was Blake who brutally murdered Yana. There were no other suspects in the case. The crime had nothing to do with the Russian mafia or Blake's jealous girlfriends. An analysis of the man's blood revealed traces of prohibited substances, but the motives for his action remained a mystery. The detectives had to work hard to find answers to this question. During the interrogation, Blake admitted that he had never been popular with women. He implied that it was money that attracted mistresses to him, not his personal qualities. The detectives speculated that Yana had refused him intimacy, and Blake could not come to terms with it. Trying to delve deeper into his past, the police looked for people who had known Blake since childhood. They questioned family members, school friends, teachers, ex-wife, mistress, and friends. However, none of them dared to openly talk about Blake. It was difficult for everyone to believe that he was capable of such a horrible crime. A forensic psychologist concluded that Blake did not suffer from mental disorders. In his opinion, growing up in a wealthy family and strained relations with his father formed Leibel's irresistible need to control women and dominate them. The psychologist believed that Blake was used to getting what he wanted at any cost. Moreover, deep down he harbored dreadful fantasies. When Yana's behavior provoked rage in him, these secret horrors burst out. When the police familiarized themselves with Blake's graphic novel, Syndrome, they were shocked by what they saw. On the cover was a doll with a scalp removed, and the contents of the book hid even more terrifying details. Blake seemed to have brought his brutal creation to life. In February 2018, the Kasyan family won a civil case against Blake libel. The court ordered him to pay Olga and Yana compensation in the amount of $42 million. In June 2018, 2 years after the tragedy, the trial of Blake libel began. Video surveillance footage showed that on the day of the crime, Blake ordered food for delivery twice. The courier did not notice anything suspicious, although Yana was already suffering at the hands of a sadist at that time. The torture lasted approximately 7 to 8 hours, and at any moment Blake could have stopped, but this did not happen. The defendant's brother, Cody Libel, was present at every court session. He refused to give comments to journalists or communicate with the press. Libel's lawyer tried to convince the court that the graphic novel, Syndrome, was not actually written by Blake, but by authors he hired for money. Allegedly, it was they who transferred their sick fantasies from paper to real life. But despite all the efforts of the defense, Blake Libel was found guilty of the brutal murder of his common-law wife Yana Kasyan. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Olga Kasyan cannot forgive herself for not breaking down the door when the police first arrived on the call. Perhaps it would have helped save Yana's life. At the time of sentencing, Yana and Blake's daughter was 2 years old. The Libel family still has not provided any financial support for little Diana. Yana's most cherished dream was for her daughter to grow up in America. But due to lack of funds, Diana now lives in Ukraine, in the city where her mother was buried. Olga Kasyan confessed, "For some reason, I constantly want to talk about her. It helps me to keep living. I feel her presence every day, every minute." Daisy Coleman, a young beauty from Missouri, seemed to have everything necessary for happiness: a compassionate soul, a sharp mind, and numerous talents. However, behind her attractive appearance hid a deep inner trauma caused by horrific events the girl experienced at an early age. Daisy was born on March 30, 1997, in the small town of Albany, to the family of Michael Coleman, a doctor, and his wife Melinda, who worked as a veterinarian. The girl was the second of 4 children and had 3 brothers. Tragedy struck the Coleman family in 2009 when Daisy's father and one of her younger brothers got into a car accident on their way to a wrestling competition in a neighboring town. Their car veered off the road and flipped over, resulting in the death of the head of the family on the spot. After this, Melinda and the children moved to the larger city of Maryville, where the mother had to raise 3 sons and a daughter on her own. Despite the difficulties, the woman bravely coped with the challenges of fate. No one in the family, who had already suffered one terrible loss, could have imagined the misfortune that awaited them ahead. The morning of January 8, 2012, was freezing, with the temperature dropping to 0. It was then that 14-year-old Daisy Coleman came to her senses in the yard of her own house, lying in the snow with her hair frozen to the ground. The girl was wearing only a t-shirt and sweatpants. The first thought that flashed through her clouded mind was, "Am I dead?" Daisy could neither get up nor call for help, she could only cry silently. By some miracle, the girl managed to crawl to the front door and knock on it with her last strength. The clock showed 5 in the morning. Fortunately, Melinda, who was sleeping in her room, woke up from the knock. At first, the woman thought it was the whimpering of freezing dogs wanting to get into the house. Throwing on a robe, she headed for the door to let them into the warmth, but on the threshold, she saw her daughter, who was almost unconscious, lying on the cold steps. Daisy reeked of alcohol and could not utter a word. Melinda screamed, calling for her sons. The boys instantly ran downstairs and brought their numb sister inside. The whole family was frightened and bewildered. At first, they tried to warm the girl with blankets, but the mother, carefully examining Daisy, suspected serious frostbite on her legs. Then she filled the bathtub with water and ordered her sons to take their sister to the bathroom. Leaving the unconscious girl there, the boys left, and Melinda undressed her daughter herself. The woman went cold with horror when she saw huge bruises and crimson spots on Daisy's body. Only then did it dawn on her that something terrible had happened to her child. Placing her daughter in a tub of cool water, the woman slowly increased the temperature, warming the girl's body. Her experience as a veterinarian told her how to act in cases of frostbite. Fortunately, Daisy's condition improved, but she still could not speak coherently. Melinda, seriously alarmed, called the police. Officers examined the girl, but her alcohol-clouded mind did not allow Daisy to shed light on the events of the previous night. They had to listen to Paige, Daisy's friend, who was staying overnight at the Coleman's house in the girl's room that night. And this is what she told them. On Saturday, January 7, 2019, Daisy invited her best friend Paige for a sleepover. In the evening, the girls watched horror movies and sipped alcohol, which they had secretly stolen from the Coleman's home bar. Closer to night, Daisy started texting with Matthew Barnett, a 17-year-old friend of her older brother and a popular player on the school football team. Learning that the girlfriends were bored, Matthew sent them a message, "Hey girls, want to have some fun at my place?" Daisy and Paige, delighted with the offer, agreed without hesitation to meet him and his friends. On January 8, around 1 in the morning, they crawled out of the window of Daisy's bedroom and ran around the corner of the house, where Matthew and 4 of his buddies were waiting for them. The boys took the girls to the Barnett residence, helped them crawl through the window into the basement, and warned them to be quiet so as not to wake Matthew's parents, who were sleeping upstairs. According to Paige, as soon as they found themselves in the basement, Matthew began pouring Daisy drink after drink. Paige just watched as her friend drank non-stop. At some point, one of Matthew's friends, Nicholas, approached Paige, took her by the hand, and led her to an adjacent empty room in the basement, where contact occurred between them at his initiative. Meanwhile, Matthew and Daisy disappeared into another room where there was a wide bed. Several times, Paige noticed through the open door what was happening there. Daisy, almost unconscious, was lying on the bed, unable to move or say a word. Matthew took advantage of her helplessness and had sexual intercourse with her. And his friend Jordan filmed it all on his phone camera. Around 2 in the morning, the group began to disperse. The boys put the girls in the car and drove them to the Coleman's house. Paige got out first, and Matthew told her that Daisy needed to sit in the cold to sober up. He assured that they would stay with her outside and sent Paige to bed. Believing the boys, she went into the house alone, climbed through the bedroom window, and instantly fell asleep in her friend's bed. At the same time, Matthew and his friends dragged Daisy out of the car. The girl was nauseous, so they took off her shoes, took her purse and phone. While Daisy was vomiting, the boys held her hair. Then they carefully laid the girl on the frozen ground near the house and quickly drove away, afraid that someone would notice them. The defenseless Daisy lay in the snow for about 3 hours in light clothing, a t-shirt and sweatpants. She had no shoes or socks, and her wet hair was frozen to the ground. The police officers who arrived at the call thoroughly inspected the house and yard. In Daisy's room, they found 5 empty bottles of alcohol, and outside, the girl's purse, her cell phone, shoes, and traces of vomit. That same morning, Daisy was taken to the hospital, where doctors found numerous bruises on her legs and signs. Tests showed that the girl's blood alcohol level was almost twice the legal limit. After a few hours in the hospital, Daisy regained consciousness but could not remember or explain anything, admitting only that she had drunk too much. She did not hide the fact that she had taken alcohol from the home bar without her mother's permission and secretly ran away at night to the boys. At 11 a.m. on January 8, law enforcement officers found Matthew Barnett, Jordan Zek, and Nicholas Gramudis, charged them, and took them to the station for interrogation. Matthew did not deny the fact of Daisy Coleman that night but insisted on the voluntary nature of the act. According to him, the girls were already tipsy at the time of the meeting. At first, Barnett denied treating Daisy to alcohol, but the more he spoke, the more he got confused in his own testimony. Eventually, the boy admitted that he had raised the girl's alcohol level to melt her icy heart. Matthew claimed that he used a condom, which he got rid of on the way when he was driving Daisy home. Jordan initially refused to testify but then reported that he had filmed Matthew kissing Daisy on Nicholas' phone. The video lasted about 10 seconds, managed to circulate in the company, but was quickly destroyed by the frightened cameraman. Nicholas, who had been intimate with Daisy's friend Paige, was the only one who immediately fully admitted his guilt. He was sent to a juvenile correctional facility. Matthew's friend, in whose car the young men were driving the girls around, said that during the ride, Daisy was crying incessantly, and Barnett expressed fears that the girl's brother Charlie would kill him if he found out what had happened. Meanwhile, information surfaced that a couple of days before the incident, Matthew Barnett had been invited to dinner at the Coleman's house, where he peacefully dined with the family at the same table. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon on January 8, a search was conducted in the basement of the Barnett residence. The police seized bedding, several empty bottles, men's underwear, and disposable cups. During repeated interrogations, Sheriff's Deputy Roxanne White, talking to Matthew, doubted the truthfulness of his testimony. At one point, she even suggested that the girls might have provoked the boys with their behavior, seeking to attract attention to themselves. The officer praised Barnett for taking care of Daisy and driving her home, somehow not attaching importance to the fact that he later left her to freeze on the street. Several days passed. Daisy Coleman fully recovered, and her life was no longer in danger. However, the girl still could not remember anything new about the events of that fateful night. 2 months later, in March 2012, all charges against Matthew Barnett and Jordan Zek were dropped. The district attorney concluded that sexual intercourse between the young men occurred by mutual consent. The scandalous video shot by Jordan was never recovered, although several classmates claimed to have seen the recording of Matthew kissing Daisy. Examination of text messages on the couple's phones showed that they communicated about once a month. In the correspondence, Coleman hinted to Barnett that she was ready to sleep with him in exchange for a bottle of hard liquor. Their correspondence on the eve of January 8, full of crude hints and obscenities, was also discovered. After Matthew's release, it turned out that he was the grandson of Rex Barnett, an influential politician and former member of the state legislature. Rex Barnett was a member of the Committee on Criminal Justice and Public Safety, so he was well acquainted with many prosecutors and police officers in Missouri. Matthew and Jordan were released, and they returned to their usual lives. Meanwhile, Daisy Coleman hoped that the hype surrounding her nighttime adventure would subside. She continued to go to school, but instead of support from her peers, she faced outright hostility and bullying. Most of her acquaintances sided with Matthew, and Daisy was called a whore and a slut. The girl instantly turned into an outcast, withdrew into herself, and tried to spend as much time alone as possible. Coleman, who had previously led an active social life, played sports, and danced, now became invisible. She had to leave the school cheerleading team. Daisy's mother, Melinda, received anonymous threats at home and work every day. Soon, the woman, who had worked at a veterinary clinic for many years, was asked to resign. After that, the Coleman family decided they could no longer stay in Maryville and moved to another town. In the spring of 2013, their empty house, put up for sale, burned to the ground. The police could not determine the cause of the fire, but rumors spread through the town that Matthew Barnett's father was involved in the arson. Some time later, under extremely mysterious circumstances, the house of Paige, Daisy's friend, also burned down. By that time, the girls had already stopped communicating. By the way, Paige also became an outcast at school and suffered from nightmares for a long time. Time passed, and Daisy's story got into the media. The girl began to receive active support from people all over the country who had experienced similar ordeals. Coleman managed to get the case against her main offender, Matthew Barnett, reopened. A trial was held, but the young man was found guilty only of leaving Daisy alone in the cold at night. Barnett was sentenced to 2 years of probation and ordered to pay the Coleman family $1,800 in compensation. No charges were brought against the other persons involved in the case. Daisy Coleman continued to live her life, regularly receiving not only words of support on the internet but also threats from anonymous users. She understood how unfairly people had treated her. The girl took every negative comment about her very painfully. In 2016, when 19-year-old Daisy was in college, the documentary Audrey and Daisy was released on Netflix, dedicated to the problems of bullying and harassment on social networks, as well as their tragic consequences. Coleman became one of the main characters of the film and told her own story. But the fate of the second heroine of the film, a girl named Audrey from California, turned out to be even harder. Almost the same thing happened to Audrey as to Daisy in 2012, but she could not survive it either physically or morally. The girl's photos spread through the network at a frantic speed and caught the eyes of her friends and foes. Audrey's last message on social media was a cry of despair: "My life is ruined. The whole school knows about everything. I will never get rid of this shameful reputation. Everyone around considers me scum. I just want it to end finally." 9 days later, the girl committed suicide, unable to withstand the humiliation that crashed down on her from all sides. Audrey's parents managed to get a criminal case initiated only 6 months after their daughter's death. 3 guilty boys were sentenced to 30 to 45 days in prison. Later, their families paid the girl's parents about $1 million in moral compensation. Let's return to Daisy Coleman. In 2018, she decided to start life from scratch and moved to Colorado, where she got a job in a tattoo parlor. At the same time, the girl was working on a documentary project dedicated to her recovery and rehabilitation. But in June 2018, Daisy was in for a new blow of fate. Melinda, the girl's mother, together with her brother Tristan, got into a car accident on the way to Colorado. The 19-year-old young man died on the spot. The circumstances of that accident still remain unclear. On social media, Daisy admitted that after the tragedy, it became increasingly difficult for her to restrain her inner demons, put on a smile, and pretend that everything was fine. After her brother's death, Coleman became a co-founder of a charitable organization designed to help victims. The girl continued to share her own tragedy and support people with a similar fate. In her posts, Daisy repeatedly admitted how difficult it was for her to fight the emotional pain, panic attacks, and constant terrifying memories. In the summer of 2020, 23-year-old Daisy complained to her friends that she was being stalked by an unknown man who regularly sent her threats. Back in December 2019, the girl had turned to the police about this, written statements about the surveillance, begged for help, but all her pleas remained unanswered. On August 4, 2020, Coleman wrote on Twitter that she was afraid to leave the house, could not walk the dog or go to work. According to her, she had completely stopped eating and sleeping. A few hours later, a new post by Daisy appeared on Facebook. The girl reported that some man had approached her house and knocked on the door. Coleman wrote that she was very frightened because she assumed that earlier he could have stolen her keys, and now he could easily get inside without any problems. Daisy also claimed that the stranger had stolen her photo, registered on one of the sites, and was now offering services for money on her behalf. After reading these messages, Melinda, the girl's mother, called the Colorado police and asked them to urgently check on her daughter. At 4 p.m., law enforcement officers arrived at the call. Daisy let them into the house, where they stayed for about an hour. The girl again told them that she was being stalked by an unknown man. The officers did not notice anything strange or suspicious in her behavior. But shortly after the police left, 23-year-old Daisy Coleman called her boyfriend via video. Just during the conversation, she took out a pistol, put it to her temple, and pulled the trigger. The confused young man did not even fully realize what had happened at first. The connection was lost, the girl stopped answering calls. The frightened boyfriend dialed 911. When the police officers reappeared at the Coleman house at 8 p.m., they found Daisy already dead. Melinda made the news of her daughter's death public on social media. "She was my best friend, a wonderful daughter," the woman wrote. "How I wish I could take all her pain upon myself. Daisy never managed to recover from what a gang of young men did to her at school. It's terribly unfair. My baby girl is gone from us forever." According to her mother, she had fought for years for her daughter's physical and mental health, doing everything in her power. The woman admitted that in recent months, Daisy had indeed been stalked. And shortly before her death, the girl found out that she would never be able to have children. After Daisy's death, the tattoo parlor where she worked was robbed. The perpetrator took out an album with exclusive sketches and the girl's tattoo machine. 4 months passed. In December 2020, 58-year-old Melinda Coleman wrote another poignant post on social media dedicated to her beloved daughter. And then she took a gun in her hands and did the same as Daisy. Only 2 sons remained in the Coleman family, the elder Charlie and the younger Logan. The charitable foundation established by Daisy organized a fundraiser to support the boys who were suddenly orphaned. It is known that Matthew Barnett, despite everything, quite successfully arranged his life and career. After the death of Daisy and her mother, the man publicly expressed his condolences to the Coleman family. Emily Longley, a stunning 17-year-old girl, was just entering adulthood, filled with grand dreams and aspirations. But neither she nor her family could have imagined the incredible trials that fate had in store for them. Emily was born on February 22, 1994, in London, the capital of Great Britain. Her parents, Mark and Curlin Longley, were a loving and friendly couple. When Emily was a year and a half old, doctors discovered she had a severe ailment, osteoporosis. In addition, she suffered from asthma, eczema, and food allergies to many products. At the age of 2, the Longley family welcomed another daughter, Hannah. Despite the frequent hospitalizations of her older sister, the girls were very close, and Emily always took care of her younger sibling. This touching sisterly bond continued into the future. In 2003, the Longley family left London and moved to New Zealand, primarily due to Emily's health condition. She was 9 at the time, and Hannah was 7. Doctors advised a change of climate, so the parents chose Auckland, New Zealand's largest city with a population of about 1.5 million. The ecology there was excellent, with fresh and clean sea air that had a beneficial effect on the girls' well-being. Although the family missed their relatives and friends left behind in England, Emily's physical condition was above all else for her parents. But 5 years later, in 2008, the relationship between Mark and Curlin deteriorated. They confessed to their daughters that they no longer loved each other. The couple made the difficult decision to divorce, although they maintained a friendly relationship for the sake of their children. But for Emily and Hannah, their parents' separation was a serious emotional shock. Emily gradually matured. Her father recalled that he often heard his daughter sneaking out of the house at night through the window. She was 15 and thought no one knew about her secret trips to nightclubs. The girl, whose childhood was mostly spent in hospital wards, wanted to make up for lost time. Her father knew about this but remained silent, understanding that forbidding something to his stubborn eldest daughter was futile. In 2010, Emily graduated from high school in Auckland and told her parents about her desire to return to England and enroll in college. Mark and Curlin did not want to let her go but eventually reconciled, knowing their daughter's willful character. In the summer of that year, the girl moved to Bournemouth on the southern coast of England and settled in the house of her paternal grandparents. Emily entered college, dreaming of becoming a manager and starting her own business. In parallel with her studies, she began working at the Topshop store. Young and bright, Emily attracted everyone's attention. Moreover, she aspired to become a model and occasionally participated in advertising photo shoots. In December 2010, 16-year-old Emily met 19-year-old Elliot Turner. This young man charmed the blonde at first sight. Elliot was the son of a wealthy hereditary jeweler and loved being the center of attention. He was well known in local clubs, bars, and other entertainment venues in Bournemouth. Turner lived on his parents' money and knew no shortage of anything. His life revolved around parties, alcohol, and frivolous romances. After school, he entered university but dropped out after just a few months. It is known that Elliot repeatedly sought treatment for addictions in prestigious clinics. At 17, he had a serious relationship in which he showed cruelty to the girl. He was jealous, made scenes, sent threatening messages. Elliot considered himself all-powerful and saw violence as the only way to assert his authority. His ex-girlfriend even went to the police. In January 2008, the court banned Turner from any contact with her. Friends characterized Elliot as an aggressive and ruthless manipulator. He created the image of a gangster for himself and tried to maintain the reputation of a bad boy. Turner carried a hammer with him everywhere in case someone dared to contradict him. Elliot demanded that he be respected and his opinion heeded. He could be generous, not sparing money for drinks for his friends, and boasted about his new car, a gift from his grandmother. But girls were wary of Turner and were in no hurry to start romances with him, knowing his biography. When in December 2010 he met Emily, he fell head over heels in love and immediately became very attached to her, calling her his Barbie. Emily, who had just moved to England, knew nothing about Elliot's past. The lovers often vacationed at resorts, walked and had fun until late at night. The guy did not spare money for recreation with his chosen one. But after a few months, he showed his true colors. Elliot began to control Emily, be jealous and treat her cruelly. He was literally obsessed with his Barbie. Turner reproached her for revealing outfits and behavior that, in his opinion, was wrong. His jealousy reached such a level that in a fit of rage, Elliot threatened to kill the girl. Emily realized that Turner was not the one she wanted to spend her life with. In February 2011, Emily wrote Elliot a note with 4 points. 1. I love you. 2. Don't say you'll kill me. 3. Stop talking about your ex-girlfriends. 4. Stop being aggressive. You scare me. Better be a cool guy. In April of the same year, Emily flew to New Zealand for the Easter holidays to see her family after 6 months apart. Mark Longley met his daughter at the airport. Emily rushed into her father's arms, hugging him tightly, and confessed how much she had missed him. The girl and her father had always been very close and trusted each other. The holidays were wonderful. The Longleys walked around the city a lot, visited their favorite pizzeria, and talked for hours. During one such conversation, Emily told her dad about her new boyfriend, Elliot Turner, but expressed doubts about continuing the relationship. The girl considered herself too young for a serious relationship and admitted that she intended to break up with Elliot immediately upon returning to England. The 2-week vacation flew by quickly. The family accompanied Emily to the airport, although the girl sadly admitted that she did not want to leave. Parting with loved ones was not easy, but Emily promised to return to New Zealand in 5 months, planning to come for the Rugby World Cup, which was to last from September 9th to October 23rd. Emily boarded the plane while her family drove home. Already on the way, Mark received a message from his daughter. "Dad, I'm so glad we got to see each other. I love you." And a few days later, in a short correspondence, Emily confessed that she had broken up with her boyfriend, without going into details, just wanting her father to know. However, in reality, as soon as the girl returned from her trip, Elliot Turner began to reproach her for the photos she had posted on her Facebook page. In these pictures, taken at a party during the Easter holidays in New Zealand, Emily was posing surrounded by handsome half-naked men. Elliot was furious with jealousy. In response, Emily categorically stated that she no longer wanted a relationship with a guy who constantly controlled her, was jealous, and threatened her. Turner reacted aggressively and made a scene. In addition, he admitted that he had hacked Emily's social media accounts and read her private correspondence. That's how Elliot found out that his Barbie was communicating with other guys and had even stayed the night with one of them. Turner was raging with jealousy, although he himself was not faithful to Emily and openly cheated on her with other women. On the evening of Friday, May 6, 2011, Emily went with her friends to an entertainment establishment. There is a photo showing the girl entering the club in a rather revealing outfit. Soon Elliot Turner appeared there too, suggesting that he was following the girl. Emily and Elliot had fun at the club separately, each in their own company, drinking and talking with friends. At some point, the guy approached Emily and started a scandal, calling her a whore. In response, the girl told Elliot everything she thought about him, and at the end threw the rest of her drink in his face. It is known that that night at the club, Turner was very upset, even crying when telling a friend that Emily had dumped him. He confessed that he wanted to kill the girl and throw her body in the bushes, shouting that he would go to jail for 10 years for it, but would come out and remain a millionaire. However, he finally laughed it off, saying it was just a joke. Emily was extremely upset by the quarrel and decided to leave the club and go home. Elliot caught up with her on the street, tried to hug and calm her down. In the end, he managed to persuade the girl to go to his house for a serious conversation. Emily knew that Turner lived with his parents, so perhaps she agreed, hoping that in the presence of his parents he would behave more restrainedly. But the very next morning, on Saturday, May 7th, at 9:45 a.m., Elliot's mother Anita Turner called the emergency services and reported that an unconscious girl was lying in her son's bed. It was Emily Longley. Anita spoke quite calmly, saying that she had tried to feel for a pulse in the girl but without success. According to her, Emily was not breathing, and her skin had turned a bluish hue. Before the ambulance arrived, Anita listened to the dispatcher's instructions and tried to resuscitate Emily. But, unfortunately, when the medics arrived, it was already too late. They could only pronounce the young girl dead. Soon the police arrived at the scene. The investigators entered Elliot Turner's bedroom. In the middle of the room was a large bed on which lay Emily's lifeless body, dressed in a denim top and shorts. There were no visible injuries or damage to the body, so the medics assumed that the cause of death could have been a heart attack or some oncological disease. Thousands of kilometers away, in New Zealand, Mark Longley woke up in the morning and saw numerous missed calls and messages on his phone from his mother, ex-wife Coleman, and younger daughter Hannah. In voice messages, Hannah tearfully begged her father to call back immediately. At one point, Coleman's desperate cry was heard in the background, repeating the single phrase, "Emily is dead." Mark could not believe what he heard. He was in a state of shock. The man immediately called his mother in England, and she confirmed the terrible news. It was some kind of horrible dream. Then he contacted the police, and the officers informed him that his daughter had died in her sleep. The father immediately realized that something terrible had happened. After all, on the eve of the tragedy, on May 6, Mark had corresponded with Emily on social media, and his daughter wrote that everything was fine with her. Meanwhile, the girl's body was sent to the forensic laboratory for autopsy and necessary tests. At the same time, Elliot and his parents were taken to the police station for questioning. During the interrogation, the guy said that in the evening he and Emily had been hanging out at the club, drinking. Then they went to his house, got into a fight there, and during the fight he grabbed the girl by the neck and pushed her away from him. Then he brought Emily some water, she calmed down. Then they both went to bed, and in the morning Elliot found that the girl was dead. Elliot insisted on his innocence, assuring that he had not harmed the girl in any way. He confessed that he loved Emily and was extremely saddened by her death. When the police asked Turner to undress, they noticed several scratches on his right hand and a small bruise on his stomach, also on the right side. Elliot's parents, Anita and Lee Turner, told investigators that they had spent the whole night in their bedroom and had not heard anything. And in the morning, when Emily did not wake up, they immediately called an ambulance. By the way, a few words about the Turner family. Elliot's mother, Anita, was originally from Indonesia. She moved to England, where she met the wealthy hereditary jeweler Lee Turner and successfully married him. The couple had a son, their only beloved child, whom they greatly spoiled. After the interrogation, the family was released. As soon as Elliot got home, he immediately posted a joint photo with the deceased girl on his Facebook page and a post with condolences. While waiting for the autopsy results, investigators learned that a few days before her death, on May 5, Emily had posted a strange entry on her social media page. The girl reported that she had a stalker. According to her, an unknown man called her and started inviting her on a date. When Emily asked where he had found out her number, the stalker replied, "I'll tell you about it when I see you in person." The frightened girl hung up, but the calls did not stop. The stranger continued to insist on a meeting. The police managed to find out that shortly before her death, Emily had visited a nightclub and quarreled there with Elliot in front of many witnesses. Friends told about the difficult relationship of the couple, about Turner's obsession, his jealousy, desire to control everything, cruelty, aggression and threats against the deceased. However, none of them could believe that Elliot was really capable of murder. Friends believed that Turner was simply intimidating others to maintain his image as a ruthless gangster. A few days later, the autopsy results came in. The forensic expert could not establish the exact cause of death. There were almost no injuries on the body. However, a small hemorrhage in Emily's eyes indicated that the girl had most likely been strangled. Traces of Elliot Turner's DNA were found under the victim's nails, which could indicate a struggle between them. Traces of Emily's saliva and remnants of her makeup were found on the right sleeve of Elliot's shirt. This suggested that at some point the young man's forearm was at the level of the girl's mouth. According to the forensic expert, Emily died at about 1 o'clock in the morning, while the rescue service was called only at 9 in the morning. When the police first arrived at the Turner house, they noticed suitcases with candles in Elliot's room. His passport was in his jacket pocket. All this gave rise to suspicions that the young man might have been planning to escape. Investigators suspected that someone from the Turner family might be involved in Emily's death, but there was no direct evidence. Therefore, the detectives decided to secretly install eavesdropping equipment in the suspect's house, hoping to find out if Elliot and his parents were hiding any important information. And indeed, just a few days after the bugs were installed, the investigation managed to make progress in the investigation of Emily's death. The recordings clearly heard the Turner family discussing the girl's death. It became known that immediately after the murder, Elliot wrote a letter in which he confessed that he had dealt with his girlfriend out of jealousy of other men. After that, he packed his things, intending to leave for Spain, but his parents managed to dissuade him. Elliot's mother, Anita, took her son's jacket from the room, in the pocket of which was his confession. And his father Lee tried to destroy the letter by smearing it with bleach, dissolving the ink. On the wiretap recordings, Elliot raged, accusing the already dead Emily of ruining his life. He shouted that the girl was to blame for everything herself, that no one had ever made him so angry as she had. And only the head of the family, Lee Turner, expressed regret about what had happened. "We did the wrong thing. We interfered with the investigation, destroyed evidence. I think about it every day, every moment. This situation is constantly gnawing at me from the inside." The recordings also captured Elliot instructing his parents on what exactly they should tell the police and how to behave so as not to arouse suspicion. A week after the tragedy, the younger Turner was arrested. He continued to deny everything. Elliot's lawyers tried to question the authenticity of the audio recordings made at the Turner house. However, having considered all the circumstances of the case, the judge allowed the prosecution to use these recordings as weighty evidence. Anita and Lee Turner were also detained and charged with obstruction of justice. They destroyed important evidence, delayed calling an ambulance, and gave their son the opportunity to cover his tracks. The trial took place in May 2012. This time, Elliot's lawyer claimed that his client had used force against the girl in self-defense. As Turner told the court, on that fateful night he and Emily had a fight. The girl behaved inappropriately, started hitting him with her hands and feet. Elliot tried to calm her down. At one point, he took money out of his pocket and told Emily to call a cab and get out. After that, she got even angrier. According to Elliot, that night Emily seemed to have gone crazy. He didn't know how to stop her, how to calm her down. So at one point he grabbed the girl by the neck with his right hand and pushed her onto the bed. As Turner confessed, after that he pinned Emily down and strangled her for about 5 seconds. After that, according to Elliot, he let go of her hand, jumped out of bed and ran out of the room. In the kitchen, he made himself some tea, drank it and calmed down a bit. Returning to the bedroom, he decided that Emily was just sleeping, so he didn't touch her anymore. And in the morning he found that the girl was dead. When asked by the investigator whether Anita believed that Emily had ruined her son's life, the woman was silent for a few seconds and then answered, no. Did she know that Emily had died back at night? Also no. Anita claimed that she was not aware of the contents of the letter that Elliot had written immediately after the murder. The prosecution insisted that the defendant had killed Emily Longley, unable to bear jealousy towards other men. It was established that a few hours before the tragedy, the girl had been spending time at a nightclub in the company of Luke Ashford, a friend of Elliot's. The court also heard information that the younger Turner was a spoiled child from a wealthy family and skillfully manipulated his parents. Loud parties often took place at Elliot's house. The young man would invite crowds of guests, generously treat them to drinks, and have fun with them until dawn. On Turner's computer, investigators found a gruesome history of search queries. Already after committing the murder, he was looking for information on how to avoid responsibility for crimes. While in pre-trial detention, Elliot sent letters to his friends, assuring them that he would soon be released, buy a new car, and move to Spain. But the judge very quickly dispelled the young rich man's illusions. On May 22, 2012, 20-year-old Elliot Turner was sentenced to life imprisonment with the right to apply for parole no earlier than 16 years later. Pronouncing the verdict, the judge called Turner a person with innate arrogance, for whom the bright, sweet and kind Emily was just another trophy. Elliot's parents, Anita and Lee, were also found guilty of trying to justify their son. They destroyed important evidence and, instead of immediately calling medics, gave the criminal the opportunity to cover his tracks. 51-year-old Anita and 54-year-old Lee Turner were sentenced to 27 months in prison each. The relatives of the deceased Emily, Mark and Coleman Longley, were extremely outraged by this court decision, believing that the murderer had received too lenient a punishment for his terrible, brutal act. In October 2012, the press reported that Elliot's cellmates had beaten him up in prison, after he hung photos of the deceased girl in his cell and boasted about letters from female admirers. Another attack on Turner occurred when he told other prisoners that he would soon be released and return to his luxurious life filled with champagne, expensive cars, and beautiful women. It is known that Anita and Lee Turner served half of their sentence in prison and were released in 2013. After her release, Anita, as an Indonesian citizen, was going to be deported, but since she was the legal wife of the Briton Lee Turner, the woman managed to avoid being sent back to her homeland. The couple still lives in the house where the murder took place. According to relatives of Emily Longley, her parents Mark and Coleman and younger sister Hannah had a very hard time coping with the loss of their beloved daughter and sister. The girl was buried in New Zealand, and at the farewell ceremony 17 white doves were released into the sky, one for each year of her life. Mark and Coleman often visit Emily's grave, remembering their child with warmth and sadness. In interviews with journalists, the girl's father Mark talked about how proud he was that Emily had moved to England, got an education, worked, and was not afraid of anything. He regrets that he will never see what a wonderful woman his daughter could have become, will never know what kind of mother she would have been, and will never hug the grandchildren that Emily would have given him. Mark remarried and became a father again. He has a growing son, Hunter, who is now 10. The boy never saw his older half-sister but heard a lot of good things about her. Mark also takes care of his middle daughter Hannah, who graduated from university and is making a career. Her mother Coleman also found new love and is happy in her second marriage. In 3 years, Elliot Turner will have the right to petition for parole, by which time he will be 35. One can only hope that common sense will prevail in this matter, and the Commission will make a fair decision regarding the prisoner who still has not repented of the crime he committed. Thank you for watching this story. Write your thoughts about it in the comments. Don't miss the future videos, subscribe and like the channel. Take care of yourself and people you love.